Today I'm going to be reviewing Unbreakable, Split and Glass, the trilogy of movies by M Night Shyamalan that came out over a period of 20 years. First up, Unbreakable. Released in 2000, this was the follow-up to The Sixth Sense, and they have much in common. Both set in Philadelphia, both star Bruce Willis, and both have big twist endings, which gave Shyamalan a bit of a reputation as a one-trick pony for a while, especially when it was followed by Signs and The Village, which also had twist endings. But for me, Unbreakable is by far the best of those early movies. It's a deconstruction of superhero movies made at a time when there weren't very many of them around, instead of making frequent references to the comics they were based on. Bruce Willis stars as David Dunn, the only survivor of a train crash, who is persuaded by Samuel L. Jackson's Elijah Snow that he may be a real-life superhero. Some of the reasoning is a little shaky, to be honest. He's never been to hospital and never been sick. Well, neither have I, but I'm pretty sure I would have noticed by now if I had super strength. Nevertheless, he embraces the role, only to be blindsided at the end by a twist, which I will not spoil, but at the time it was incredible, way better than the one at the end of The Sixth Sense. Bruce Willis gives a much better performance than he usually does. It's a real shame he mainly does mindless action movies, because in movies like this and 12 Monkeys, he shows he's capable of so much more. I guess it depends on the director he's working with at the time. It's interesting to compare this to all the Marvel movies that have come since. This is slow paced, with lots of single take scenes, and there's very little action. I think there's just one fight scene towards the end. In a modern superhero movie, all this would have taken place in the first half hour before the real story even really started. And that's not a criticism. This is a superhero movie as a character study, and all the better for it. 16 years later, we got Split. This was something of a return to form for Shyamalan, coming after a period where his films were critically panned and commercially disappointing. Though to be fair, he did make The Visit the year before, which was arguably the start of his renaissance, although I still haven't seen that one. On the surface, Split is a standalone exploitation movie in which a man with multiple personalities kidnaps three teenage girls, and they try to escape him. Now, given that premise, the movie does pull its punches a little. For most of the movie, the threat is merely implied, and the worst the girls have to suffer is to remove a few layers of clothing, when in reality you know they would have to go through a lot worse. But that would have made for a much darker movie, which would be really hard to watch. Frankly, the scenes where Casey is abused by her uncle as a child are bad enough, and that happens off screen. The film has been criticised for an unrealistic depiction of dissociative identity disorder, as the vast majority of sufferers are non-violent. But even in the movie, most of Kevin's personalities are not violent, and the only one that is also has superhuman abilities, so we're clearly far from reality there. If anything, it made me want to know more about the condition. Is it true that only one personality can be diabetic, or female, or gay? Perhaps the time has come for a high-profile Netflix documentary on the subject, if it could be done without exploiting anyone. And I realise that's a big if. As to the acting, James McAvoy gives a tour de force performance, successfully bringing to life many different personalities, each with their own body language and manner of speaking. And Anya Taylor-Joy as the final girl Casey is every bit as compelling to watch. She was only 19 when she made this movie, but had already shown her talent in The Witch, and this was another step towards becoming one of the best young performers in the business. Basically, the whole movie is about exploring those two characters, their backstory, how they interact with each other, and it's all done extremely well. It could have been a great one-off picture, but then the final scene has a cameo from Bruce Willis as his Unbreakable character, and you see it's set in the same universe, which opens up a whole lot of possibilities. The final film in the trilogy is Glass. And fans of the first two, like myself, may have gone into it with wild expectations of it becoming a huge Avengers-style epic blockbuster. Realistically, that's not the sort of movie M. Night makes. It was always going to be more of a slow-burning character piece, but it's hard not to be disappointed all the same. It starts as you might expect, with David Dunn from Unbreakable hunting down Kevin Crumb from Split and having a bit of a fight, until they're both captured by the police and locked up in an asylum, where they remain for most of the movie. I suspect budget may have had an influence on the direction of the story. Towards the end, they start to set up an epic final confrontation on the top of a skyscraper, like in Die Hard, but they only get as far as the hospital car park. Again, disappointing. Most of the movie is given over to Sarah Paulson as a doctor, trying to convince these characters that they don't actually have superpowers, but are just imagining it, which is rather tiresome for anyone who's seen the first two movies, which make it clear that they absolutely do. It's not a terrible idea, and it could have made an interesting standalone movie if their abilities were left ambiguous, but that's not the case here. Being Shyamalan, there is a final twist, but it's not very satisfying, and it serves mainly to close down any possibility of further stories in this universe, rather than opening them up as the endings of the previous two movies did. The actors do a good job of reprising their characters. James McAvoy slips right back into his many roles, and it's kind of worth it just to see him in different situations. Bruce Willis is a bit of a disappointment. He starts off fine, but kind of fades into the background as the movie goes on. But Samuel L. Jackson steps right up for the second half of the movie and seems to relish the chance to expand on his character. Anya Taylor-Joy gets little to do, which is a shame. It's mainly all about the guys, and she's essentially reduced to a love interest, which is a major downgrade from the complex character she was before. Overall, it's a hard one to recommend wholeheartedly. If you have seen the other two movies and want to see more of these characters, then you do get that, as long as you don't expect anyone to get a happy ending. That's it from me. If you want to see more videos like this, be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you soon.